The first-class cabin went silent as the flight attendant leaned in, her voice low and final. "You two need to move. These seats are for priority guests." Marcus felt his sister Chloe tense beside him as eyes turned and phones quietly rose. They hadn't raised their voices. They hadn't broken a rule. Their only crime was sitting calmly in seats the crew had decided they didn't deserve. Threats followed, security was mentioned. Removal was next. What no one in that cabin understood was that this humiliation had a timer on it. Because Marcus wasn't reaching for a boarding pass, he was reaching for his phone. And the man about to read his message wasn't a lawyer or a supervisor. He was the CEO of the airline and their father. The Pantheon Lounge at JFK's Terminal 4 wasn't just a waiting area. It was a statement. Apollo Airlines, the dominant force in US luxury air travel, had designed it to be a sanctuary from the masses. Marble floors reflected the soft golden light from recessed fixtures. Waiters dressed in sharp black suits glided silently between high-backed velvet armchairs, offering complimentary champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Marcus Harrington, 18, and built like the high school quarterback he was, scanned the room with a practiced, neutral expression. He wore a simple black hoodie from a brand only recognizable to those who knew, paired with designer cargo pants and immaculate white sneakers. Beside him, his sister, Chloe, 16, was tapping away on her phone, a curtain of intricate braids framing a face that was currently set in mild annoyance. She was the more expressive of the two, dressed in a way that was both casual and astronomically expensive. "I still don't see why we couldn't just take the G6, Chloe muttered, not looking up from her screen. "You know Dad's rule," Chloe Marcus said, sipping a sparkling cranberry juice. "Domestic flights we fly commercial. Keeps us grounded." His words. "We're in a private lounge that costs more than a mortgage payment. Sipping mocktails. This isn't grounded. This is just private jet light. He's just trying to make us use our air miles." Marcus chuckled. "He owns the airline, Chloe. He doesn't care about air miles. It's about optics. He doesn't want us becoming those kids." They both knew exactly who those kids were. They saw them at their private school in upstate New York. Kids who had never heard the word no and treated service staff like furniture. Their father, Robert Harrington, the founder and CEO of Apollo Airlines, had drilled humility into them from birth, a trait he valued above all others. He had built his empire from a single leased plane, and he never let his children forget the value of respect. Their quiet was interrupted by a woman in a crisp grey Apollo Airlines suit. She had a tight perm and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her name tag read, Cynthia Lounge Supervisor. "Excuse me," Cynthia said, her voice carrying a sharp, skeptical edge. She was looking at their boarding passes, which were sitting on the table. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake. This lounge is for our Olympus first-class passengers and Centurion Black card holders only." Marcus and Chloe exchanged a look. It was the look they had shared 100 times before. "That's right," Marcus said, pointing to the passes. "Sats 1A and 1B Olympus first. That's us." Cynthia's smile tightened. She picked up Marcus's pass. "These are very exclusive seats, sir. Sometimes there are errors in the system. Are you sure you weren't meant to be in premium economy? We have a very nice lounge for our gold tier members just down the hall." The implication was thick and suffocating. "You don't belong here." Chloe's head snapped up. Her annoyance was gone, replaced by a cold fire. "Are you implying my brother can't read? Or are you implying our tickets are fake?" Chloe Marcus warned softly. He turned back to Cynthia, his voice polite but firm. "My name is Marcus Harrington. That is Chloe Harrington. The tickets were booked under our father's account. Robert Harrington. You can look it up. We are in the correct lounge." The name Harrington hung in the air. To an airline employee, it should have been a 5-alarm fire. But Cynthia, insulated by her own prejudices, only saw 2 teenagers in hoodies. Harrington was a common enough name. "I'm sure," Cynthia said, her voice dripping with condescension, "but I'll need to see some identification to verify these passes. It's a new security protocol." Marcus sighed. This was the tedious, exhausting part of their lives. He knew his father insisted they fly commercial to learn, but sometimes it felt more like a punishment. He slowly pulled out his wallet and produced his driver's license. Chloe did the same. Cynthia stared at the IDs. She stared at the tickets. The names matched. The computer system, when she reluctantly typed them in at a nearby terminal, flashed bright green. VIP UPM Ultra Priority Member. Handle with care. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. She turned back, her entire demeanor shifting into a grotesque fawning apology. "Oh, Mr. Harrington, my deepest apologies. I didn't recognize you." "Of course. Please, can I get you anything? More champagne? Perhaps the truffle fries? They're on the house." "Of course. We're fine," Marcus said, his voice flat. He took his ID back. "We were just leaving to board anyway." He and Chloe stood grabbing their backpacks. They walked out of the lounge, leaving Cynthia standing frozen in a puddle of her own humiliation. "She's going to have a fun time explaining that to her manager," Chloe whispered as they walked down the jet bridge. "Dad's rule," Marcus said, shaking his head. "If they treat you badly when they think you're nobody, they don't deserve your respect when they find out you're somebody." They stepped onto the plane flight 212 to LAX. The bright, sterile light of the cabin instantly felt different, more contained, more trapped. And waiting for them with a smile as artificial as the cabin air was the senior flight attendant. Her name tag read Brenda. The Olympus first-class cabin on Apollo Airlines flagship A330 was less a cabin and more a series of small private apartments. There were only 8 suites arranged in a 121 configuration. Marcus and Chloe were in 1A and 1B, the 2 window suites at the very front left of the aircraft. Each suite had a high sliding door for total privacy. A 24-inch screen, a mini bar, and a seat that reclined into a fully flat bed. Brenda Sullivan, the in-flight service director, stood at the entrance. She was a woman in her late 50s who had been flying for 30 years. She wore her uniform like armor, and her blonde hair was sprayed into a helmet of professional immobility. She saw her cabin not as a public transport vehicle, but as her living room, and she was the exacting host. When she saw Marcus and Chloe, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She'd seen the passenger manifest. Harrington 1A, Harrington 1B. She had assumed it was a couple, maybe a political consultant, and his wife, not 2 black kids in street here. "Welcome aboard," she said, her voice a practiced, sugary chime. "Can I see your boarding passes, please?" Marcus held his out. Brenda looked at it, then at him, then back at it. "Sat 1A just right here," she gestured. "And my sister is 1B right behind me," Marcus said. "Yes, of course," Brenda said. She stepped aside, but her eyes followed them. A tiny judgmental frown etching itself between her brows. A younger flight attendant, Scott Miller, hurried over. "Can I help you with your bags?" he asked, his tone slightly more genuine. "We're good, thanks," Marcus said easily, lifting his backpack into the overhead bin. Chloe did the same. They slid into their respective suites, the sheer luxury of it all still feeling vaguely absurd to them. Pre-aperture beverage, Brenda asked, her smile back in place. "We have champagne fresh squeezed orange juice." "Just a water for me, please," Marcus said. "Coke Zero if you have it," Chloe added. Brenda's eye twitched. Champagne, and they asked for water and soda. Her internal monologue was scathing. No class. Must have won the lottery or cashed in 1,000,000 credit card points. They have no idea how to behave here. "Of course," she said, and glided away. Scott returned with the drinks. "Just let us know if you need anything at all," he said. "My name is Scott and Ms. Sullivan, and I will be taking care of you today." "Thanks, Scott," Marcus said, offering a small appreciative nod. The boarding process continued. The other 6 passengers trickled in. A tech bro in 3A, a quiet older woman in 3B, and then the last to board a flurry of noise and entitlement. It was the Smithson family. Paul Smithson was a ballist television producer with an ego that far outstripped his credits. His wife Jennifer wore sunglasses indoors and carried a tiny yapping dog in a designer bag. A clear violation of cabin policy, but one Brenda immediately ignored. Their two teenage children, a boy and a girl, were glued to their phones complaining loudly about the Wi-Fi. They were seated in 2G and 2K, the two middle seats. Brenda darling Jennifer Smithson chirped, taking off her sunglasses to air kiss the flight attendant. Mrs. Smithson. Mr. Smithson, what a wonderful surprise to have you on board. Brenda gushed, her entire demeanour transforming. She was no longer a flight attendant. She was a supplicant. It's just awful, Paul Smithson grumbled, gesturing to his seat. We're in the middle. My agent booked this. The middle, can you imagine? Oh, that simply won't do. Brenda said, her face a mask of performative horror. We're a full flight today, but let me see. Let me see what I can do for you. I'll be right back. She bustled to the galley, her mind working furiously. The Smithsons were somebody. They were loud, they were demanding, and they were known to her. They were the right kind of passengers for Olympus class. Chloe from her suite had her headphones on, but wasn't listening to music. She'd seen the entire exchange. She nudged the panel on her brother's suite wall. You see that she texted him over the plane's internal message system. See what Marcus texted back? The Beast Brigade in 2G and that flight attendant Brenda. She's practically bowing to them. Just ignore it, Chloe. It's 5 hours. We'll sleep. I have a bad feeling she's looking over here. Marcus peered around the edge of his suite. Brenda was standing near the galley, whispering conspiratorially with Scott. She kept glancing toward 1A and 1B, her expression sour. She had looked at her tablet, checking the manifest again. Harrington. The name clearly meant nothing to her. She thought it was a coincidence. She had a problem. The Smithsons were unhappy, and in her world, the unhappiness of a minor celebrity outweighed the comfort of two unknown teenagers. She made a decision. It was a decision based on 30 years of subtle, unchallenged bias, a decision rooted in the toxic assumption of who belongs and who doesn't. She walked back to the Smithsons. I believe I have a solution for you, she whispered, smiling. Let me just rearrange some things. She straightened her jacket, pasted on her customer service smile, and began the walk toward the seat 1. A Brenda Sullivan glided down the aisle and stopped at the entrance to Marcus's suite. She didn't knock on the open door. She simply leaned in, invading his space with a cloud of expensive, sharp perfume. Sir, she began, her voice low and falsely conspiratorial, as if she were letting him in on a secret. Marcus took off his headphones. Yes, we have a bit of a situation, she said, gesturing vaguely toward the back of the cabin. We have some very, very frequent flyers, a family who were unfortunately separated by a booking error. Marcus waited. He knew exactly where this was going. They are seated in the center, Brenda continued, and they had specifically requested window seats. As you can imagine, they are quite distressed. That's unfortunate, Marcus said, his voice perfectly level. Brenda's smile didn't waver. It is. Now I see that you and your sister are here in 1A and 1B. We are a full flight, but what I can do is offer you 2 very comfortable seats in our premium economy cabin. It's just behind the curtain. I can even offer you a $300 travel voucher each. For the inconvenience, the offer was so insulting, it was almost funny. A $300 voucher for a $9,000 seat. She was asking them to move from a private suite with a lie-flat bed to a standard recliner separated from the rest of economy by a thin curtain. Chloe in 1B had her headphones off now. She was listening to every word, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest. No thank you, Marcus said simply. We're fine here. Brenda's smile faltered like a light bulb flickering. She had expected a quick, intimidated yes. She had expected them to be grateful for the voucher. Sir, perhaps you don't understand, she said, her voice losing its sugary coating and taking on a brittle plastic edge. These are very important guests. They are part of our Apollo family. We really need to accommodate them. I understand perfectly, Marcus said, his patience, a famously long fuse beginning to shorten. You're asking us to give up the seats we paid for, to give them to someone else. The answer is no. From the center aisle, Paul Smithson was watching, his arms crossed, an impatient scowl on his face. He wanted his window. Brenda's face flushed. This wasn't just a request anymore. It was a public challenge to her authority. She leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a harsh whisper. "Listen, son," she hissed, the professionalism gone, replaced by pure, uncut condescension. "I don't know how you got these tickets. Maybe you used your parents' points, or maybe it was a system glitch, but these seats are for our top-tier clientele. I am trying to do you a favor by offering you the voucher. Now I'm going to ask you one more time to be courteous and move for our priority guests." The mask had slipped. It wasn't about a booking error. It wasn't about priority. It was about her perception. She looked at Marcus, at his hoodie, at his skin, and saw someone who didn't belong. This was the moment Chloe erupted. A favor. Chloe stood up in her suite, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the quiet cabin. Every passenger in first class turned to look. "A favor. You're asking us to move from seats that cost more than your last vacation, offering us a $300 insult, and you call it a favor." Brenda recoiled, shocked at the direct confrontation. "Young lady, I will not be spoken to in that tone." "No, you won't speak to us in that tone," Chloe shot back. "Who are you to decide who belongs here? We paid for these seats. These are our seats. We are not moving." "Chloe, sit down." Marcus said, his voice low, but urgent. He stood up, towering over Brenda. He was no longer a polite teenager. He was a cold, angry man. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet, "we are not moving. Your important guests can stay in the seats they were assigned. You need to go back to the galley now." The cabin was dead silent. The Smithsons were staring. The tech bro was openly filming on his phone. Brenda was trapped. She had been publicly and thoroughly defeated. Her face was a mottled, furious red. She had never in 30 years been spoken to like this. She looked from Marcus's cold, steady glare to Chloe's defiant stance. And in that moment, she made the second and final mistake of her career. She decided to escalate. Brenda Sullivan drew herself up to her full height. The artificial sweetness was gone, replaced by a rigid, icy fury. She was no longer a flight attendant. She was an enforcer. "Sir," she said, her voice now loud enough for the entire cabin to hear, "you are creating a disturbance, and your sister is being belligerent." "We are not creating a disturbance," Marcus replied, his voice still low, trying to de-escalate the situation she had created. "We are simply refusing to give up our paid seats. You are the one harassing us. Please return to your station." Harassing Brenda let out a short, incredulous laugh. "I am the director of this flight. I am responsible for the safety and comfort of all passengers. And right now, you are interfering with my duties. Mr. Smithson and his family are valued Apollo patrons, and you are refusing a simple, courteous request." "It's not a courteous request," Chloe snapped. "It's a discriminatory one. You saw us and you assumed we didn't belong. You wouldn't dare ask the woman in 3B to move. That is a very serious accusation, young lady." Brenda said, her eyes narrowing. She saw her opening. She wasn't just dealing with an inconvenience anymore. She could frame this as an attack. She turned to her junior Scott, who had been hovering near the galley, looking terrified. "Scott, call the gate agent. Tell them we have 2 non-compliant passengers in 1A and 1B. They are refusing to be reseated and are becoming aggressive." What Marcus said stunned. "We are not non-compliant. We are in our assigned seats. You are the one being aggressive." "Brenda, maybe we should just—" Scott began, his hand trembling as he reached for the in-flight phone. He was new. He knew this was wrong. "Do it, Scott." Brenda barked. "Or I'll have your job too." Scott flinched and picked up the phone. "Gate. Yes, this is Brenda on flight 212. I need security to the jet bridge. I have 2 passengers in first class, 1A and 1B, who are refusing to comply with crew instructions. Yes, potential removal." The other passengers gasped. Removal was a serious word. It meant being dragged off the plane by police. Paul Smithson, from his center seat, chimed in, his voice oily and self-satisfied. "Just do what she says, kids. Don't make a scene. Some of us have places to be. It's just a seat. It's not just a seat. Chloe cried out, her voice breaking with frustration and humiliation. Tears welled in her eyes. This is insane. We didn't do anything. That was the tipping point for Marcus. Seeing his sister cry, seeing the smug look on Paul Smithson's face, and seeing the cold, triumphant smirk on Brenda's, something inside him snapped. The grounded son disappeared, and the CEO's son took his place. He looked at Brenda. "You're making a terrible mistake," he said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "The only mistake," Brenda sneered, "was letting people like you into this cabin in the first place. It was the final nail. The people like you hung in the air undisguised and venomous." The tech bro in 3A was still filming his phone, now pointed directly at Brenda. "Okay," Marcus said. He pulled out his phone. The cabin door was still open. They were still connected to the 5G network. "What are you doing?" Brenda said, momentarily confused. "You can't make a call. We're preparing for departure." "I'm not making a call," Marcus said, his thumbs flying across the screen. "I'm sending a text." He typed a simple, clear message. He sent it to the only contact in his phone, labeled Dad. The message read, "Dad on Flight 212 at JFK in 1A and 1B senior flight attendant named Brenda Sullivan is trying to kick us off the plane. She's moving us for another passenger and just called us. People like you. She's calling security. Please help." He pressed send. Brenda scoffed. "Who are you texting your lawyer?" "Go ahead. By the time he files a complaint, I'll be in LA and you'll be back in the terminal. Security will be here any second." "You're right," Marcus said, his eyes locking onto hers. "They will." A few rows back, Mrs. Smithson said to her husband, "Good. Get these little troublemakers out of here so I can have my window." The cabin was thick with a toxic, charged silence. Chloe was crying quietly in her seat. Marcus stood like a statue, his phone in his hand. Brenda stood in the aisle, arms crossed. The victor. And then, less than 30 seconds later, the bing of the in-flight phone system echoed through the cabin. It wasn't the gate agent calling back. It was a different, more urgent chime. Scott, wide-eyed, answered it. "Jai." Scott speaking. He listened. His face went from pale to the color of ash. He stared horrified at Brenda. "Brenda," he whispered, his voice shaking. It's Captain Michaels from the cockpit." "What does he want?" Brenda said, exasperated. "He wants to know," he said, "who is harassing the Harrington children." The blood drained from Brenda Sullivan's face. The name which she had dismissed as a coincidence now slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. "Harrington." She looked at Marcus, who was still standing, his expression unreadable. What did he say?" she stammered. "He said," Scott repeated, his voice barely a squeak, "to stand down, do not touch the passengers in 1A and 1B, and await a corporate representative. He said, 'Oh God, Brenda, what did you do?'" Before Brenda could even process this, her own personal tablet, the one issued by the airline, began to buzz violently. An urgent Priority 1 video call was coming through from corporate HQ. At the same time, the main cabin door, which had been about to close, was flung open. It wasn't security. It wasn't the police. It was a man in a $5,000 suit sprinting down the jet bridge, his face pale and sweating. This was Mr. Davies, the JFK Director of Airport Operations for Apollo Airlines. He was the most powerful employee at the entire airport. And he looked like he'd just seen a ghost. "Hold the door," he yelled, barreling onto the plane. "Nobody move. Brenda Sullivan, stand right where you are." Brenda was frozen. The entire cabin was frozen. Mr. Davies stormed into the first-class cabin, his eyes wide with panic. He saw Marcus and Chloe. "Mr. Harrington, Miss Harrington, are you all right? Were you touched? Were you threatened?" Marcus just nodded. "We're fine, Mr. Davies, but this flight attendant, Brenda, was about to have us removed." Davies turned on Brenda. The professional respect was gone. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "Do you have any idea who you just threatened?" He seethed, his voice low and shaking. Brenda, realizing her world was collapsing, tried to muster her defenses. I, I was handling a passenger dispute. The Smithsons, they needed to be moved. These two were being non-compliant. The Smithsons. Davies looked at Paul Smithson, who suddenly looked very, very small. You're holding this flight over Paul Smithson. Brenda, the man you just sent a text to the man who just called me from the primary operations bridge was Robert Harrington, our CEO, his father. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the cabin. Paul and Jennifer Smithson's jaws dropped. The tech bro in 3A whispered, "Holy," and made sure his phone was still recording. Brenda's knees buckled. She literally grabbed the side of a seat to hold herself up. "No, I didn't know." "You're not paid to know," Davies roared. "You are paid to treat every passenger with respect. You violated the culture of respect policy. You violated federal anti-discrimination statutes, and you harassed the family of the man who owns this company. People like you," he quoted, apparently having been told the exact words. "Are you insane?" Brenda's tablet was still buzzing. Davies ripped it from her hand and answered the video call. The face that appeared on the screen was cold, powerful, and utterly devoid of mercy. It was Robert Harrington. He was not in his office. He was, as Marcus had guessed, in the middle of a board meeting. The entire executive board was visible in the background, staring at the screen. "Mr. Davis," Robert Harrington's voice BM'd from the tablet. "What is the status of my children?" "They are safe, Mr. Harrington. I am on board now," Davies said, holding the tablet up. "Dad, we're okay." Marcus said, his voice calm again. Robert Harrington's eyes softened for a millisecond as he saw his son, then hardened as he looked past him. "Where is she? Where is Brenda Sullivan?" Davies turned the tablet to face the now sobbing flight attendant. "Miss Sullivan!" The CEO's voice cut through the cabin. "You are terminated, effective immediately. Your actions are a disgrace to this airline. You will be met at the gate by security. You will surrender your credentials and be escorted from the property. You are banned from all Apollo Airlines property and flights for life. Do you understand me?" Brenda was hyperventilating, unable to speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "And Scott Miller," the CIO's voice barked. Scott, who had been trying to disappear into the galley bulkhead, jumped. "Yes, sir. Did you participate in this, or did you try to stop it? She told me to call the gate, sir." Scott stammered. I didn't want to. He's a coward, not a monster." Chloe spoke up, her voice small. He looked scared of her. Robert Harrington considered this. "Mr. Miller, you are suspended pending a full investigation. You will deplane with Miss Sullivan. If you cooperate fully, you may have a future in our ground crew, but your days in the air are over." "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir." Mr. Davies, the CEO, continued. "Remove them from my aircraft and get the Smithsons off too. Paul Smithson up. What we didn't do anything. We're the victims here." Robert Harrington's face on the screen turned to him. "You are the priority guests. I'm told you witnessed a flight attendant harass 2 teenagers and you encouraged it. You, sir, are the cause of this delay. My airline does not cater to passengers who incite discrimination. Get off. You can fly with another carrier. Your Olympus membership is revoked." Jennifer Smithson let out a shriek and her dog started yapping. "Get them off the CEO," said his voice final. "Mr. Davis, secure a new crew for this flight. Apologize to the other passengers for the delay. And Marcus, I'll see you in LA. I love you." "Love you too, Dad," Marcus said. The call ended. The scene in the first-class cabin was one of absolute stunned silence, broken only by the sound of Jennifer Smithson's yapping dog and Brenda Sullivan's gasping sobs. Mr. Davies, his face still grim, motioned to the 2 airline security personnel who had followed him onto the plane. "Please escort Miss Sullivan and Mr. Miller off the aircraft. Collect their badges and crew IDs." "You can't do this." Brenda wailed a desperate final plea. "I have 30 years. 30 years with this company. I have commendations. And you threw it all away in 30 seconds, Davies said, his voice cold. "Your personal prejudices. Miss Sullivan have just cost you your career, your pension, and your flight benefits. You should have thought of that before you decided to play gatekeeper. Now walk." The security officers, with practiced impersonal efficiency, took Brenda by the arm. She didn't resist. She was a broken woman. She stumbled down the aisle, her face a ruin of tears and shame, past the very passengers she had tried to impress. Scott followed behind her head, down, looking like a man walking to his own execution. Next, Davies turned to the Smithsons. "Mr. Smithson, Mrs. Smithson, get your dog and get your bags. You're deplaning. This is an outrage." Paul Smithson blustered, but the conviction was gone. He had been publicly dressed down by the CEO. "I'll sue. I'll call the papers. I'll have you know I'm a very important man in Hollywood." "You're a man in 2G on a flight you're no longer on," Davies retorted. "Call whoever you want. We'll be happy to provide them with the video from the passenger in 3A. I believe you're on it, encouraging my flight attendant to harass 2 minors." Paul Smithson's face went white. He looked over at the tech bro, who gave him a cheerful little wave, his phone still pointed at him. The footage was already uploading to the cloud. Defeated, the Smithsons gathered their belongings, their faces burning with a humiliation far deeper than any they had tried to inflict. As they passed, Marcus and Chloe Jennifer Smithson shot them a look of pure hatred. Chloe simply stared back, her expression blank, until the woman looked away. The cabin door closed behind them. The plane, now cleared of its toxic elements, felt suddenly lighter. Mr. Davies walked to the front of the cabin and addressed the remaining bewildered passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Apollo Airlines and from our CEO, Robert Harrington, personally, I offer our deepest apologies for this delay. What you witnessed today was a complete and total failure to uphold our airline's values. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. None. We will be bringing on a new flight crew immediately. For your trouble, everyone on this aircraft will be receiving 50,000 bonus miles and a full refund for their ticket today." The cabin, which had been tense, erupted in quiet applause. "Mr. Harrington, Miss Harrington," Davies said, turning to them, his voice now gentle. "Again, I am so sorry. Your new flight crew is on its way from the lounge. They are our best. Can I get you anything at all while you wait?" "We're fine, thank you," Marcus said, finally sitting down. He looked at Chloe, who had wiped her tears away. "We're okay." Within 10 minutes, a new crew, led by a warm professional director named Maria, had boarded. They were efficient, kind, and pointedly, almost reverently respectful to Marcus and Chloe. The plane door was closed. The pilot's voice came over the PA system, apologizing once more for the crew change, and flight 212 finally pushed back from the gate. As the plane climbed over the Atlantic, Marcus and Chloe closed the doors to their suites. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving them exhausted. "Well," Chloe texted Marcus, "that was a lot." "You're great," Marcus texted back. "You stood up to her. You're the one who called Dad. Had to. She was going to have us arrested, Chloe. She called us people like you. That's the line." He leaned his head back against the plush leather. His father's rule about flying commercial had always seemed like a chore. Today, for the first time, he understood it. It wasn't about teaching them humility. It was about testing the humility of the people who worked for him. And Brenda Sullivan, after 30 years, had failed the test. The flight to Los Angeles, operated by a new hand-picked crew, was a study in flawless service. The atmosphere, once thick with confrontation, was now serene. Maria, the new in-flight service director, addressed Marcus and Chloe with a quiet, profound respect that was neither finning nor cold. It was simply professional. It was what the service should have been from the start. But the peace in the cabin couldn't undo the turmoil inside the 2 teenagers. They had been targeted, humiliated, and threatened. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a cold, metallic exhaustion. They didn't talk. They simply retreated into their private suites, the sliding doors closing on a world that had, in the span of 15 minutes, shown them its ugliest face. When Flight 22 touched down at LAX, the sun was beginning to dip into the Pacific, painting the smoggy horizon in hues of orange and purple. The moment the seatbelt sign turned off, Maria was at their doors. "Mr. Harrington, Miss Harrington, please take your time. An escort is waiting for you at the jet bridge." The escort was Frank Gibbs, a mountain of a man who served as Robert Harrington's head of personal security. He had a kind face and eyes that had seen everything. He greeted them not as VIPs, but as a concerned uncle. "Marcus, Chloe." "Good to see you," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. He took their bags without a word. "Your father's in the car. He's eager to see you." The walk through the terminal was a blur. Frank moved them through the crowds with practiced efficiency, a silent protective barrier. They were guided through a private door, down a service elevator, and into the subterranean VIP parking garage. The armored Maybach was waiting, its engine purring. The back door opened, and Robert Harrington was on the phone, his face a mask of thunder. He was listening, not talking. He motioned for them to get in his hand, reaching out to squeeze Marcus's shoulder and then Chloe's arm, a physical, "Are you okay?" that his call prevented him from asking. They sat in the plush leather silence as the car pulled out into the LA traffic. Robert finally spoke into his phone, his voice a low, controlled weapon. "Stephen," he said clearly, speaking to his general counsel, "I don't want a suspension. I want a criminal referral." She threatened 2 minors and called for their removal under false pretenses. That is custodial interference. And the people like you comment, "That's a federal-level discrimination suit. I want the FAA notified by midnight tonight. I want her license pulled. I want every employee who has ever filed a complaint against her interviewed by morning. And Stephen find the passenger in 3A. Get his video. Pay him for it. But get it. I want it on every news desk by 6:00 a.m. This is not an internal matter. This is a public execution." He hung up without saying goodbye. The car was silent for a moment. He turned to his children, his hard CEO face dissolving, replaced by the weary, terrified eyes of a father. "Are you hurt? Did she or anyone else lay a hand on you?" "No, Dad," Chloe said, her voice small. She leaned against him, and he wrapped a powerful arm around her. "We're okay, just shaken up. She really hated us, Dad. She didn't know you, sweetheart." Robert said, his voice rough with emotion. "She hated the idea of you. She hated that you were young and black and sitting in a seat she felt you hadn't earned. She appointed herself the gatekeeper of a world she doesn't even own. She's a symptom of a disease, and I am going to rip this disease out of my company. Root and stem." Marcus had been quiet, watching the city lights blur past. "The video is already online. Dad, the guy in 3A, his name is Leo Rostston. He's a tech blogger. He's been live tweeting the whole thing. The video of Brenda of what she said, it already has over 1 million views." Robert Harrington absorbed this. He looked at his son, seeing the new hard-won maturity in his eyes. "Good," Robert said, a cold, thin smile touching his lips. "Good. That saves Stephen the trouble. The public can be the executioner." The video was a nuclear bomb. Leo Rostston had captured it all. Brenda's saccharine false concern, Marcus's polite but firm refusal, Chloe's fiery justified defense, and the horrifying venomous hiss of people like you. He also caught Paul Smithson's smug entitled, "Just do what she says, kids," and Brenda's triumphant call to security. By the time the Harringtons reached their bare estate, the story was the #1 trend on every social media platform. By morning, it was the lead story on Good Morning America, The Today Show, and CNN. Apollo Airlines was trending, but for all the wrong reasons. The hashtags Marsha Brenda, the gatekeeper, mashed flying, while Black and Apollo Shame were attached to millions of posts. The corporation under Robert's direct command moved with terrifying speed. This was not a PR crisis to be managed. It was a cancer to be excised. The first to fall, and the hardest, was Brenda Sullivan. Her escort off the plane was only the start. She was met in the terminal by a stoic, unsmiling HR executive and the head of airline security, who formally served her with her notice of immediate termination for gross misconduct, endangerment of minors, and violation of the Civil Rights Act. Her union representative, upon seeing the video, informed her that while they would file a token grievance, her case was indefensible. But Robert Harrington was not satisfied. As he'd ordered the internal investigation he launched was less an audit and more an autopsy of her career. And it turned out Brenda's cabin was not a happy one. Within 48 hours, over a dozen active and former flight attendants came forward, now protected by a CEO-backed amnesty, with stories. They told of how Brenda would swap cabin assignments to punish attendants she didn't like giving them all the economy class routes. They spoke of how she consistently overlooked black and brown attendants for promotions to the purser program. They had records of her complaints about ethnic hairstyles and how she'd send junior attendants home for improper grooming when they wore braids just like Chloe's. She wasn't just a prejudiced employee. She was a systemic rot protected by her seniority. The FAA, acting on the official complaint from Apollo Airlines and the overwhelming public evidence, permanently revoked her flight attendant certification within a week. She was grounded for life. Brenda Sullivan, who had built her entire identity on her seniority, her uniform, and the perceived glamour of her job, was suddenly nothing. She was blacklisted, unhireable by any other carrier. Her name was now synonymous with corporate bigotry. 6 months later, her condo was in foreclosure. The 30 years of flight benefits the pension, she was a year from cashing in on the 401k, matching all gone voided by the 4-cause termination. She was spotted by a travel blogger working the register at a 24-hour convenience store in suburban New Jersey. The blogger snapped a photo. Brenda in a cheap, ill-fitting polyester vest, her hair limp and grey, her face a permanent mask of sour defeat. The photo went viral, a fitting epilogue titled "The Gatekeeper's New Gate." Her karmic debt was to be paid in small, daily, humiliating installments for the rest of her life. Scott Miller's fate was less brutal, but no less tragic. His investigation was a single tear-filled interview. "I knew it was wrong," he stammered to the HR panel. "But Brenda, she assigns the routes. She could end my career. I was scared." "She did end your career." Mr. Miller, the lead investigator, said, his voice flat. "Your fear is understandable. Your cowardice is not. You chose your job over your morals, and in the end, you lost both." Chloe's comment that he was a coward, not a monster, had saved him from termination. Robert Harrington granted him a sliver of mercy. He was demoted to the ground crew at LaGuardia. His days of walking the cabins, of seeing the world, were over. His new office was the roaring, freezing cold tarmac at 3:15 a.m. His new job was to lift bags, hundreds of them, from the conveyor belt into the belly of the aircraft. He was a ghost in a high-visibility vest, loading the luggage of passengers who were dreaming in the warm Olympus-class suites above. Every time an Apollo Airlines A330 taxied for takeoff, he would have to stop and cover his face from the jet wash. A bitter kerosene-scented reminder of the dream he had been too weak to defend. The Smithsons, who had instigated the entire affair, believed their celebrity, however minor, would shield them. They were wrong. Paul Smithson awoke in his LA hotel to a frantic call from his agent. The viral video was a disaster. Paul, the agent, screamed, "You're on video encouraging the harassment of a minor. And not just any minor, Robert Harrington's kids. Are you insane?" By noon, the studio developing his new pilot had indefinitely postponed the project, citing creative differences. His agent, seeing a toxic asset, dropped him by email. Then came the letter from Apollo Airlines' legal department. It was not a request. It was a demand. It informed him that he and his wife were permanently banned from the airline. Furthermore, as he had incited and encouraged a disruptive and discriminatory incident, he was being held civilly liable for the costs incurred. This included the full refund of all 8 first-class and 150 main cabin tickets, the 50,000 bonus miles awarded to every passenger, and the operational fees for the 2-hour delay. The bill came to $482. "You can pay it," the letter concluded, "or our legal team will be happy to depose you in open court about the incident. We suspect the press will be very interested." Paul Smithson paid. He liquidated stock, emptied his child's college fund, and paid. The graveling public relations scripted apology he posted on Instagram was torn to shreds by the public. Jennifer Smithson, his wife, found her invitations to charity galas and exclusive club events mysteriously lost in the mail. They weren't just cancelled. They were erased from the social circles they held so dear. Their entitlement had a price, and they had just paid it in full. Weeks later, the media storm had passed. Apollo Airlines had unveiled a new mandatory company-wide culture of respect training program with the viral video from Flight 212 as its central case study. Robert Harrington had turned the incident into a powerful, expensive, and public lesson. In the quiet of their New York home, Marcus and Chloe were processing the invisible scars. They had won. Karma had been swift and brutal, but the victory felt hollow. It's not like I'm happy she's working at a gas station, Chloe said quietly, scrolling past the photo of Brenda on her phone. It's just she looks so pathetic. I just wanted her to stop. She wouldn't have stopped, Chloe, Marcus said, not looking up from his textbook. People like that don't stop. They just find weaker targets. He'd become more serious in the past weeks. The easygoing nature of his youth replaced by a more cynical, watchful edge. Robert Harrington walked into the room holding his briefcase. He was flying to Singapore for a new route launch. You're all packed, he asked Marcus. Your flight to visit your aunt in Chicago is tomorrow. Marcus nodded. Yeah, 10:00 a.m., flight 412. Apollo Airlines. I assume Chloe asked, a dry, humorless laugh in her voice. Always, Robert said. He sat down. A rare moment of stillness for him. I know what I'm asking you to do after what happened. It's not fair that you have to be my secret shoppers. We know, Dad, Marcus said. We know why you do it. It's not just to keep you grounded anymore, is it? Chloe asked, finally understanding. It's a test. You're using us as a canary in a coal mine. Robert Harrington looked at his children, his pride mixed with a profound aching guilt. My company is a machine with 80,000 moving parts. I can't be everywhere. I can't see everything. The Brendas of the world, they're very good at hiding from me. But they're not good at hiding from you. They don't see you. They see what they think you are, and in doing so, they show me who they are. He stood up, kissing them both on the head. Your seats are in first. 1A and 1B. But if you'd rather take the G6, just this once, I'd understand. Marcus and Chloe looked at each other. The shared, silent understanding passed between them. The exhaustion, the anger, the humiliation, and then the resolve. No, Dad, Marcus said, standing up and grabbing his backpack. We'll fly commercial. We'll take our seats. Chloe nodded, a small, determined smile returning to her face. Someone has to. And that's how a single text message brought an entire flight crew's world crashing down. Brenda Sullivan's 30-year career, built on a foundation of prejudice and a petty abuse of power, was dismantled in 30 seconds. She thought she was weeding out people who didn't belong, but in reality, she was exposing herself. This is a story of hard, fast karma. It shows that the masks people wear, the polite smiles, the crisp uniforms can hide a darkness. But that darkness rarely withstands the light of a single powerful act of resistance. The Smithsons learned that entitlement isn't a shield. And Brenda learned in the most brutal way possible that the person you disrespect might just be the one who owns the entire company. What do you think? Was this full-scale firing justified, or was it an over-the-top reaction? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of karmic justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and please subscribe to the channel for more real-life drama.